Hello, I'm Dr. Chris Walton, and in this little video I'm going to go over the 3 hidden causes of anxiety. Now, I guess most of us have had anxiety in our lives. Today's world sort of creates anxiety with all the uncertainty and strangeness that's going on. But if you've ever had anxiety and you're not sure why you're anxious, you're not particularly worrying about things so much, but you just feel anxious, then this video could really highlight those reasons, the causes of that anxiety. So let's have a look. If you like this video, could you do me a favor and just click the like button and put in a comment? Trying to grow a YouTube channel today is literally like watching paint dry unless you get comments and likes and all that sort of stuff, else YouTube just simply doesn't show it to anybody. So if you could do that, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so the first one of these 3 hidden causes of anxiety is caffeine. Now, caffeine, depending on your tolerance to it and the amount of caffeine that you have, caffeine creates the same chemistry as that feeling of anxiousness, which is adrenaline and cortisol, stress chemistry. So you can have a cup of coffee in the morning or a cup of tea in the morning to get that little bit of stimulation to wake us up, and sort of most people like that. But if you have a little bit too much, you may notice this yourself, that starts to move from being stimulated to feeling anxious, and we tend to feel that in the gut. We've got too much stimulation going on, which makes us feel anxious. And of course, there's no psychological cause for that. We're not particularly worrying about that, about anything. It's just that physiological chemistry that's creating that feeling of anxiety. And a lot of people today drink a lot of coffee throughout the day, and of course energy drinks are very popular today. There's loads of those on the market which are full or very high, have high caffeine content. And a lot of people can think that they need to be stimulated, they need to be up to sort of be in the zone, to do their work, to be on their A game, and thinking that's like a high performance state. It's actually a stress state, because you've got stress running through your body, stress chemistry stimulating you, that actually switches off your frontal lobes a little bit, so you can't quite think as clearly and make as good decisions, but you feel like you can because you've got that stimulation. You feel like you've got the energy from the caffeine. So we have to be very careful about that one. Particularly mid-afternoon, our rhythms of the body slow down between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. And if we're trying to keep up when the body wants to go down, that creates even more stress in the body and creates more anxiety. So just to be aware of that one, and maybe just try that yourself. See what level of tolerance you have, where a cup of tea or a cup of coffee gets you the stimulation that you want, but without feeling the anxiety. And it's a crafty one, and caffeine is a very high up in the list of addictive drugs, would you believe? So it's something we have to be careful of. You know, we don't think of it as a drug that's addictive, but that stimulating feeling is a nice feeling. We like it. It keeps us alert, you know, but we don't want too much of that, because anxiety is its very close friend. So just to be one to be aware of, and maybe certainly mid-afternoon, if you feel like you need an up, just trading that for a green tea or a cup of tea with less caffeine in it. And again, particularly if you're drinking those energy drinks with high caffeine content. And of course, we all have our own tolerances to caffeine. So you just have to sort of gauge that yourself, but just be aware that caffeine can create anxiety. And once we're aware of that, then we can moderate it so that we can be stimulated and get the benefits without moving into an anxious state. Okay, number 2 is food intolerances. Now, most people have an intolerance to some type of food or drink. And really, a food intolerance is something that we eat that the body doesn't want. It's as simple as that. It creates a little stress response, and what I mean by stress response is a little immune reaction which creates an inflammatory reaction throughout the body, the tissues, the cells, to that food that we're having. And again, that creates then a little bit of stress chemistry, and we can start to feel that as anxiousness. Now, again, almost everybody has got an intolerance to some type of food, but I'm not talking about an allergy. So we've got a spectrum between intolerances to the more extreme end of food allergies, which of course can be very serious, like peanuts and things. You've heard people dying, the throat swells up and stuff like that. So hopefully if you've got an allergy, you know about it, and of course you stay off those foods completely. We're talking about intolerances, not as intense as that, but still have this little reaction that creates a little immune response, an inflammatory response, which creates stress chemistry, and then how that makes us feel is anxious or worried or irritable, something like that. Now, the biggest food intolerances, or the most common, I should say, food intolerances today, certainly in the Western world, are gluten, dairy and processed sugar. In my clinic as a doctor of integrative medicine, I test for food intolerances with every client that I see, because they're a sneaky hidden cause of stress and not feeling how we want to feel, and also draining our energy. Our body has to put energy towards processing that food, dealing with that immune response when it doesn't really want it. So think about it this way. Maybe let's say if you have a intolerance to gluten and dairy, which is very common, and you start your day off with gluten and dairy foods. Maybe you have some toast, it's very common in the UK, or cereals and milk, something like that that's got gluten and dairy in it. Maybe you have milk in your tea, milk in your coffee, and that starts a little immune response, a little inflammatory reaction in your guts. You start to feel, after a little while, a little bit anxious or a little bit unsettled, a little bit irritable, but there's an underlying anxiety feeling. And then you're thinking about your day ahead, your meeting, what you've got to do at work, who you've got to speak to, what you want to get done. And as you're thinking about those things, you're feeling anxious. So at a psychological level, then you link that feeling state in your body to actually what you've got to do that day. Now, that's not a very healthy way to start your day. So you're already in your mind thinking, that's making me anxious. That call I'm anxious about, that meeting I'm anxious about, hitting that deadline I'm anxious about, getting that work done I'm anxious about. When actually, if you didn't have the gluten and dairy in your gut and you had something that didn't create any reaction and you thought about those things, you'd be thinking about those things much clearer without an anxiety response. So this is something we have to be very, very careful about. What's actually causing the feelings in the body, particularly the negative feelings, what's causing them compared to what we think's causing them when we start to overthink about it in our mind. That's how we're feeling in the body. We're thinking about what we've got to do and we attach the two things as one thing. That's causing this. So you've got to be very careful about that. Now, the way to sort of deal with a food intolerance, you can do it on your own. You don't really necessarily need to take a test, is you can eat some food and then check in with yourself 1 hour after you've finished eating that food. An hour after you've eaten it, so you've given it a time to digest a little bit and start to get into the bloodstream. How do you feel physically? Do you feel like you've got more energy than before you ate the food? If you haven't got more energy, then what you're eating is not really working for you. It's taking more energy to process and digest it than it's giving you back. So that's not much use. How do you feel mentally 1 hour after you've had that food? Do you feel clear of mind? Have you got clarity of thought? Do you feel balanced in your mind? Or do you feel a little bit cloudy, a little bit irritable perhaps, or a little bit, you can't quite think clearly, a bit of a foggy head? Then if so, there's definitely something in that food that's not working for you. And then the same on the emotional level. How do you feel emotionally 1 hour after you've eaten that food? Do you feel calm, balanced, happy? Are you in a good state? Or do you feel anxious, irritable, a little bit angry, a little bit up and down, a little bit unbalanced? Well, there you go again. What's happened there then is something in that food is causing that within your body. So you can sort of, after a period of a couple of 2 or 3 days or a week of doing this, and then take those foods out of your diet that you've noticed you have some sort of negative reaction to, that allows you to fine-tune your own foods of what works for you and gives you energy and what actually drains you and makes you feel a negative state in your body. And this is one of the most powerful things we can do to actually feel good every day, have more energy, have our brain switched on and not switched off, and remove stress from our body. So food intolerances are sneaky little things. We all have them. The main ones are gluten, dairy, dairy and sugar. They're the most common, but it can be absolutely anything. You know, it can be anything. But just monitor that and do that an hour after you've eaten something. How do you feel physically, mentally, and emotionally? Fine tune it. Leave those foods out. And I'll tell you something that happens. If you've got an intolerance to food, let's say it's gluten, and you stay off gluten for a week, so there's no gluten in your digestive tract at all, it's all clear, and then you have gluten again, then you really know it if you have an intolerance, because it'll hit you hard and you'll feel sluggish, bloaty, anxious or whatever. Then you'll know, I had a sandwich and I was just wiped out, I was just tired. That's an intolerance to gluten or wheat, something like that. So it just gives you that ability then to fine tune your own diet, your own eating, to give you energy and to minimize your stress. Okay, the third one, which to be honest is a bit of a pisser for all of us, is Wi-Fi, EMFs, and especially 5G. This has been shown, particularly there's some studies that came out between 2020 and 2022 showing the effects of 5G on psychiatric health, psychological health, brain health, and showing that anxiety increases and depression increases when you are around too much 5G, specific frequencies of 5G. So this is, like I said, this is a pisser for all of us because it's very difficult to be away from Wi-Fi. As I'm doing this video in my office, I'm sitting 2 meters away from the router. So, you know, we can't really get away from it, but what we can do is minimize our exposure to it. Now, I want to recommend a book rather than me speaking too much on this. This is a book that's a brilliant book called EMF'd by Dr. McCullough. You can get that on Amazon. This is an exceptionally well-referenced book, very well researched and referenced, that explains all of the issues with Wi-Fi and EMF on our physical body. And it's a little bit concerning, but it's useful to know rather than so then we can make some good choices around it. But generally minimizing our exposure to Wi-Fi and EMFs, like not having our phones in our pockets, keeping the phones in our bag or away from us so we don't have those signals going into the body, and at night time switching off our Wi-Fi routers. So at least in our own house or flat or wherever you live, you're minimizing that Wi-Fi exposure. Now these are invisible issues and things we might not even think about, oh that's rubbish. I highly recommend you read that book or look online and do a bit of research on that, because these are real things. And you have to remember, every cell of our body works because of electrical activity across the cell membrane. And these frequencies that we are immersed in our environment today, they can disrupt the electrical connectivity over the cell membrane. And if that keeps happening, that means that the cell doesn't quite work properly. And if the cell's not working properly, inevitably down the line, that leads to dis-ease processes and inflammatory processes. And then we start to be sick, as well as feeling anxious and feeling depressed and being drained and everything. So it's a very, very big one, the Wi-Fi EMF thing. And again, it's a tricky one, but minimizing our exposure, keeping your phone off, not on your body, and router off at night, not taking your phone to bed, that sort of thing. But that's a very good book. Something to be very, very aware of. So we've got the three things here that can be hidden causes of anxiety, actually, and many other things. But we've got the caffeine, we've got the food intolerance, and we've got the Wi-Fi, the EMFs, too much exposure to that. All can have negative effects, not only on our anxiety or anxiousness, but different areas of not making us feel great. Little hidden causes there that we can, when we know, we've got some empowerment to make some better choices and minimize those effects. I hope you found this video useful, and I'll see you on the next one.